care about privacy because it's the project in crypto that taps into traditional finance and actually provides privacy to these users is going to completely dominate all the other projects. Like the amount of volume, the amount of TVL that's going to be attracted to that project will outshine everything that's happened in the last couple of years. And that's of course going to be Miden, but you know, that's kind of why we're, maybe not we, but like part of the reason why I'm very interested in privacy is like it's a huge market.
Yeah, on the security side, if we think about what is really blocking people from using this in day-to-day life, you know, why can't I go to a coffee shop and pay with, you know, whatever stablecoin I want? There's kind of this like nightmare scenario where if everything's totally public and transparent, people can see from day to day to day, you know, oh, Ben, I guess, went to this coffee shop right by his house, and then, you know, he went grocery store shopping on Saturday, and they can, the amount of information that you have that's, you know, not just your online identity, but your in real life movements throughout the world are all potentially just sitting public out there. It's not a space that anyone wants to be in, and not even really a world most of us could really imagine. With any of the kind of traditional web rails that we use today, it is just absolutely expected that any interactions you have are encrypted and secure and not just publicly visible. So moving from this being something that we can use to do cool investments and stack yield to something that I can incorporate into my daily life, and it's really going to change, you know, how I interact with the real world. I think privacy is kind of just a fundamental barrier that needs to be solved.
Nice. I'd also like to ask you, what are some near-term ZK privacy use cases that you think would definitely change our ecosystem? Let's start with Prabal.
I think, again, I'm very bullish on Miden. I think Miden is going to be the next big...
Marti's shining here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not financial advice. I'm an angel investor. So I think, no, I mean, jokes aside, I think we are at this point when ZK is immensely powerful. It has never been so powerful before in the industry and beyond. And finally, we are also seeing a real need for, you know, payments coming on-chain, with banks and traditional finance now starting to bring their ledgers into blockchain rails, which means that the culmination of technologies maturing and real-world adoption coming in means that ZK and privacy in the very, very near term is going to be two of the biggest amalgamations that we have seen. And Aztec has just launched. Kudos to them for building for so long. Miden will be launching very soon, I hear, and I hope. And many, many others have been doing a fantastic job. We know the amount of service that has gone by developers who are privacy enthusiasts, who did sacrifice a lot in order to give us a flavor of privacy, and really hope that in the near future we get to see and all of us be able to bear the fruits of them.
Thank you. I think one of the easiest places where privacy can shine today, and like where we can actually see it deployed already, is compliant mixers, compliant shiplet pools, and their privacy pools. OXBOW is paving the way, especially Ethereum. Like they kind of are tackling the tech part, the sort of compliance and tech part. What's still, I think, missing in the whole shielded pool space is the UX. It's like users have to really think, okay, if I deposit like a custom amount and then I withdraw that same amount, you know, like that's in theory you have privacy, but the anonymity set is much smaller. So we still have to tackle UX and how to do this easily, maybe like, you know, splitting these amounts or some kind of automation. And I feel like that's an easy win for private applications that we can already have today on layer ones. And of course, we can take this much further with more complex solutions like Aztec, Miden, and so on. But yeah, like these are the things that people can go and try out today?
Yeah, as far as things I'm most excited to see, and you already mentioned this in your talk earlier, but identity provision that doesn't require me to upload my driver's license or my passport to some random server is something that I think will just have such a nice concrete impact on things I have to worry about. It feels like every year I see a new data breach of thousands and thousands of records being exposed in the public, where it feels just inevitable that with all this data floating around, it's going to get leaked. And this is something that we don't even need kind of broader blockchain adoption to make a big difference in individuals' daily lives. It's something we can take the ZK, get it directly into the hands of agencies that are already dealing with this as a problem, and kind of solve their problem of having to deal with security and our problem of having to worry all at the same time.
Thank you. What do you see as some of the red flags in ZK systems used both for privacy and scalability?
I think it's a very loaded question. There are many.
You can put spice, like we're all here for spice, yeah.
I think apart from maybe people like Ben and some of you, it's very hard for any random person to even know what ZK system is being used and what is the red flag there. So, I mean, I remember like 2 weeks back there was this proximity gaps conjecture and a lot of discussion around it. As a user, what do I do? I don't even understand, maybe I do, but most people don't even understand what proximity gaps are, what are their impacts, which systems are they using on their everyday lives that have a ZK proof somewhere involved, which they have implicitly assumed to be secure and so on. So before even talking about red flags, I think there just needs to be much more,
Green flags?
I mean, in general, like think of like we work on the roll-up space quite a bit, and there are people like L2Beat who do an amazing job on just making sure that they say what they think is right. And it doesn't mean that I agree with L2Beat all the time. Sometimes they are they do things which I am not happy with, but that doesn't matter. What it matters is that to know that someone is looking at it, someone is evaluating it. There are many red flags. I think right now, just like every company is AI, in crypto, every company is kind of ZK. And what that leads to is that this kind of gold rush kind of a thing where everyone just claims to be ZK, but I mean, all ZK rollups are not even ZK, right? So the terminologies get vague. I'm sorry for this long answer, but there are so many of nuances that are out there, and it's so hard for us to even understand what nuances we are agreeing to. It's a landmine of red flags at this point in time, and I hope things will change. There is no standardization, there is no coherent homogeneous proof system, there is no understanding of the assumptions that we are taking with ZK and with scaling solutions as well, and I hope things are changing.
Second that.
Yeah, no, I mean those are all great points. On just the security side, one thing that I think is often really concerning is when complexity starts getting out of hand. So these systems, you guys mentioned earlier in the Miden talk about how soundness is in a kind of a special concern when you're dealing with privacy, because you lose these like monitoring systems, the ability to look at attacker traces, to know that things are going wrong and why they're going wrong as they're happening. All of a sudden, maybe someone takes an off-ramp a year later and you have no idea what the source of the problem actually was. So, obviously, like coming from Veridise, we are very passionate about making sure that there's some way that people can verify that not just kind of the zero knowledge type of verification that a computation happened, but also a more formal verification that the computation you're encoding actually matches the computation you think you're encoding. So having kind of very strict guidelines that are not just about manual review, I think is a very important aspect to making sure that we actually can trust these privacy systems. I think also just broadly, looking at a system, if you're looking more on the concerns about privacy or not, rather than just broadly, is the system going to have soundness bugs? To me, the place to look is usually the on and the off ramps. everybody likes to live in the threat model that they've pictured their system living in. You know, my user starts here, and then they do these operations, and I can prove all these operations don't leak any information. But usually the users might start a few steps back, and they might end a few steps past where you're thinking. So, you know, using tools like NEM that we've seen earlier today, and making sure that your pipeline is end to end, that, you know, like ideally you want, you know, my grandma to be able to come and use your protocol, not know it's private, and nothing's getting leaked, right? That really has to be the standard if we want to have people that are not already passionate about privacy to be benefiting from the privacy that we can provide.
Thank you. Privacy usually means lower DPS. I'm wondering why has that been the case? And is there a way for privacy and scalability to coexist together? What do you think? Someone
Yes.
decide to answer.
So historically, adding privacy to a protocol was very expensive. Like even thinking to like turn out cache and how much it costs to verify those proofs on Ethereum or like any base layer, that added a lot of scaling issues because now the L1 is actually taking much more time to verify. But, and I mean, that's true, that's kind of hard to get around this. But there's a very cool property of privacy where you can keep your state private, as in like account state private. So on Ethereum, all accounts are public. Like everything has to be held by the nodes. So that already adds to scalability issues. But with privacy, you can actually just have a commitment to an account on chain, and all the account details live in users' wallets. We have to redesign wallets. We have to completely redesign how we think about interacting with the chain and what users store internally. But that opens the door to accounts being much larger without any load on the network at all. So this is, of course, one cool thing we're building with Miden, but also other chains that are launching and have launched recently. So this is one thing where we can look forward to actually higher TPS thanks to private state.
I think, I mean, of course, as he mentioned, there are many, many cool things that you can do. I would like to phrase this as something different. If you talk about normal computation versus any form of privacy on that, there's a cost of privacy. There will always be a cost of privacy on top. The good thing is, that's the bad part, but the good thing is that this delta is going lower and lower every day. The amount of improvement that has happened every year in the ZK field, I think, is unparalleled, right? I mean, maybe AI can compete, LLMs mainly, but even like other than that, the amount of investment, the amount of research, the amount of brain power that has gone into ZK and related fields, like for example FHE, even things like witness encryptions and such, the amount of progress that we have made has never been seen before. And so the cost of privacy, no matter what kind of technology you use, is going lower and lower. So I think it is no longer about whether it's very, very costly or not. It's about how much are you willing to pay more in order to get sovereignty over your data, sovereignty over your transactional data, getting privacy of some manner, compliant privacy or absolute privacy. I don't know. There will be different solutions in this space. We will try to fight with user acquisitions by debating over which gives more user value. And at the end of it, if the protocol can justify the cost of privacy that the user is willing to pay, I think it's all good.
I don't have a ton to say on the benchmarking front. I mostly get to deal with just worrying about code correctness and letting the engineers handle performance, which is great for me. But I completely agree with the points you're making of that oftentimes scalability is something that's going to bring privacy faster to us rather than something that's working against it.
And I just want to add on that, sorry if I'm taking too long, but when we started working with our ZK proof for the bridge, we used to write custom circuits with succinct. And once SP1 came in, we now are just writing Rust codes. And this Rust code is super simple, super easy to maintain, super small because we don't do a lot of computation there. And so I can say that if Ben is doing his job of auditing SP1 correctly, I can do only an iterative audit of my Rust code, and I don't need to worry about this entire handwritten, circuit that I've used to design. So it is getting tremendously easier to develop in ZK and related fields.
Thank you. And because I'm quite a practical person, because I have an engineering background, right? I'm going to ask you, what would be the biggest bottleneck to ZK adoption, real-world adoption, both in privacy and scaling?
I think a lot of it boils down to just an educational problem. When you go out and you tell somebody, hey, I can prove that I'm not on any of these sanction lists, and I'm a citizen of this country, and I have this much money in my bank account, and I'm going to send you, 300 bytes to do it. It sounds unbelievable. It also, institutions move slowly, right? Like we're 10 years out from, transitioning away from elliptic curve cryptography, and people are still concerned about this being way too fast of a timeline. And just getting people aware of it, and then getting institutions to recognize it and review it and have standards that they are comfortable accepting, so that institutional actors and companies can say to their auditors, yeah, I'm following the guidelines, is going to be one of the biggest hurdles. So a lot of it's informational, getting people to trust it who are in these government roles.
Yeah, there's been a lot of bad PR on some of the ZK solutions, Tornado Cache, unfortunately. It's going to take some time for the industry to actually prove, like, hey, we can do privacy, but compliantly, and privacy for everyone except for terrorists, as was pitching on one of the other events. That's going to take time. Usually, might be a generation. Like I hope not. Like we're moving faster on this technologically, but it's not just the technology. Like we've solved the technology. We have to now solve these societal challenges before we get wider adoption.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. Like there are adoption challenges and just development challenges around regulation, compliance, and such. Like if I'm a developer and I'm developing a peer-to-peer payment system which is private, I have to incorporate my company somewhere. I have to run a business also. I cannot just be a developer. I mean, if you can, then that's great, but most people are ambitioning for running a business rather than just doing it for open source movement and such, right? So if you are to have to run a business, you need to have an entity somewhere. Almost all entities, unless you are in North Korea or something, and I think they also need their regulations on their own. But if you have to run a business, you need to have that, and that is one of the challenges. And I think there's ZK KYC, right, and ZK Passport, Self, and many other companies are doing many of the identity systems that he mentioned, and they are so cool to see. But if you think about, like, why does not every Tom, Dick, and Harry actually use something like ZK Passport? There are tons of regulations that regulator will come to you and ask, like, I want information of this specific person. They are not going to ask, like, oh, did you check that they were above 18? That's not a question that regulators ask. Regulators tell them that I want the full information of this particular person, which means that this company is anyways not keeping KYC documents by themselves. That's another hassle. They're using something like Samsung, who has it kept in their vaults so that a regulatory compliant request they can serve with that. So unless, and I can see that in stablecoin movements, right, that the Genius Act and all of them have changed the way that people perceive stablecoins. We need similar acts, we need similar changes in how privacy technologies are adopted and accepted within societies for us to actually see them in the real, like in the normal markets.
Thank you. I would like to use the opportunity to thank my guests for taking the time and joining this panel, and also ZK Man for the invitation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.